Hello everyone, I am Abid Hassan, Senior Assistant Editor with ETHR World. I welcome all of you to this insightful webinar on changing demand in hiring and skilling from campuses, Enterprise Outlook for 2022, presented by ETHR World in association with Simplilearn. It is no secret that the pandemic has changed the way we hire and the way we skill our workforce. Especially the campus hiring went through a drastic change. Students were anxious about their future as companies were laying off people and hiring was a topic that remained untouched. But hopefully things have changed and the campuses are offered virtual hiring and onboarding. In today's panel, we have senior industry leaders and they will be discussing the road ahead for campus hiring in the year 2022. Will there be a consistent and steady demand for more skilled candidates or companies will go traditional way? And what matters the most, degree or skill? Without any delay, I'll introduce the speakers for the webcast. We have with us Ms. Sonal Vaidya, Global Head, Organization Development and Effectiveness, L&T Technology Services. Welcome to the panel, Sonal.
Thank you. Thanks, Abid.
Please join me in welcoming Ms. Vaishali Pathak, Group Function Head, Vice President, L&D for Tech Mahindra. Welcome to the discussion, Ms. Pathak.
Hi. Thanks for inviting and pleasure joining the session.
Thank you so much. We also have Ms. Maya Sri Kumar, Assistant Vice President, Cognizant. Welcome to the panel, Ms. Sri Kumar.
Hey, hi, thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Please welcome Mr. Sanjeev Jha, Head L&D India for SBI General Insurance. Welcome, Mr. Jha.
Good afternoon. Hi, Abid. Happy to be here.
Hi. And joining me now is the moderator for this panel, Mr. Krishna Kumar, CEO, Simplilearn. Welcome, Mr. Kumar. Now, I'd like to ask Mr. Kumar to take this discussion forward with our guest. Over to you, Mr. Kumar.
Thank you, Abid. And thank you, Vaishali, Maya, Sonal, and Sanjeev for joining. Today is the last day of the financial year. I'm sure it's always a busy time, right? A lot of things are going on in parallel. So really appreciate you taking 1 hour of your time to talk to us and also share some of your learnings. So I'll start with a couple of questions, and when you answer, it will be good if you can also introduce a little bit more about the current responsibility that you have in your respective companies. Majority of the audience who has joined us to hear us out are HR and L&D professional. Not all of them are from the large companies, so we want to share a lot of learnings that we have over the years so that they can take some of those learnings and implement in their companies. So that's the prime objective that we're looking at solving as part of this discussion. So I'll start with Vaishali, you. Is that, see, last year, everything moved online. Everything moved work from home.
Sure.
Pretty much all function. It was a forced function. We were not prepared, right? But somehow I think all of us did a great job of settling it, and then the new reality got synced in, and we are where we are. But the current year, it's been one full financial year of learning that we have. And now whatever we are doing with the past learning experience. So what I wanted to understand from you is that, and I would like others also to answer the same question from your organization perspective, is that what are some of the learnings that you had in FY21 that you are implementing in FY22 when it comes to hiring and skilling in particular, and especially fresh graduates? Because I think last year during the pandemic, a lot of fresh hiring also got paused, right? Companies had offered candidates, then some of them onboarded, some of them delayed, some of them onboarded them much later, and so on. But now I see that hiring is in full swing. I think it's the best time to hire candidates. So what are some of the learnings that you implemented?
Sure. So I'll address the question in two fold. One is about the learning for the organization, as well as there has been a lot of learning for the other stakeholders in this entire ecosystem. Like when we say about freshers, it is the campuses that also have undergone a lot of change during the pandemic, the student fraternity who are looking out for the jobs, and of course the organizations. And when I say organization, it is the hiring team, the skilling team, the business units team. So everyone has really responded well to this pandemic and the change in the situation. The first thing we observe is that there is a lot of mindset change which has happened. We see that happening at the academia level, because still now we were facing a lot of gap in between the use of technology by the corporate organizations and the campuses. Like a lot of thirst on the faculty-led session, face-to-face practicals, and then getting into the lab and doing the things. And the onus was typically on to the trainer to ensure that the people are getting everything. While there were focused efforts in the organization to build the self-learning culture and see to it that everyone takes the responsibility of his or her own learning, that change now we are seeing happening right since the campuses, because everybody has moved on to Zoom or Teams or whatever, and almost even the learning in the colleges have become virtual or blended, I would say, not exactly virtual, but the blended mode. And the years to come, we will definitely see that that is helping in the overall skilling of the candidates. The second change what we have observed is a lot more use of technology during hiring, because while before pandemic we had already closed on our campus hiring for the last year, but for this FY21, if I talk about, a lot of hiring has happened using technology. And when I say technology, it could be multiple tools for interviewing candidates to find out what are their preferences, their attitude, aptitude. So a lot of technology driven things are there, and I'm sure it will get continued. And not only for the fresher hiring, but even for the lateral. In fact, for lateral, a lot of tools were already in use, but for fresher, there was a very fixed pattern set in terms of visiting the campuses and selecting the people for that. So I think that we started seeing changing slowly. And third thing is that a lot of learning has happened while people were looking out for their last year assessments. Like if I talk about the students who are graduating in FY22, their schedule is so disturbed, like they don't know when their last semester exam would happen. Their 7th semester exams got postponed. So a lot of people have now invested time into skilling themselves, maybe into certifications, some online programs. So we see that change definitely happening. So I would say the pandemic has really challenged the way we were working, thinking, executing the things. But now a lot of, I think the agility and the resilience which we are seeing, definitely a positive move, I would say, going forward.
Sure. So, Vaishali, I think thanks for sharing that. So, do you see, let's say next year, when we are back to the old normal, do you see going back to the old way of hiring, training, or you think the current hiring and training completely online will become the default way going forward?
Both would exist, both would coexist, because there are positives and the areas of improvement in both the models. So I definitely see a blended, but whatever the boundary restrictions were there earlier, like so much so and so campus, people visiting over there, those boundary restrictions are blurring. Like they lot more flexibility in terms of people applying for the positions, they're remotely working. Otherwise it was like the metro cities and the tier 2 tier 3 cities where people would go and visit the campus. I think those boundaries are no more there. So going ahead, it will be I would say the hybrid model will exist.
Thanks, Vaishali. So next I'll move to Sanjeev. And this is the first question that I'm asking about learning from previous year and what we are doing this year. I think this is something that I would like all of you to answer. And after that, some questions you can selectively decide whether you want to answer it or not. So Sanjeev, I want to give you one more context, because see, compared to all other panelists here who are representing a private and public organizations, you are more like a PSU, right? And PSU, what I understand, is a very strict guidelines from the government in the way you hire, in the way you conduct your business. So how has been your, how you guys manage it?
It has been quite a learning time, Krishna, as we speak about that. And the experience has been pretty different. Majority of HR professionals are used to the entire gamut in person. So you talk about group discussions, you talk about selling the organization at campuses, shortlisting the candidates, and then getting them to onboard, unlearn whatever they have learned, making them work ready. All this has been in person. And when we speak about the specific insurance sector, and more specifically general insurance, I'm from the L&D department, so I can tell you that this is a very knowledge intensive industry. And knowledge intensive, when I'm telling that, it is about applied knowledge. So we were of the firm belief that without a classroom training and kind of getting them exposed to what needs to be learned, because campus recruitment, one factor has been consistent, whether online or offline. Employability of the trainees who are going to come in has always been a question. So organizations and corporates are investing heavily into this, trying to convert them from all these programs that we have, campus to corporate kind of programs that we have. So those things changed overnight. And when it moved from everything becoming online, then we had to suddenly adapt and become agile towards that, which we did. Apart from that, there was another factor that there was, when this lockdown happened, suddenly the schedules went haywire, as Vaishali rightly said. So many of them who had scheduled exams and were supposed to be joining after graduating from there, those schedules went haywire. Somebody was joining in July, somebody was joining in August, somebody was joining in September, and somebody didn't know when he's going to join in. And organizations, helter and skelter, were also rescinding on their offer letters. In this kind of scenario, the mind frame of those candidates took a toll, actually. This is where we learned, and we have now imbibed something called as between the offer letter and the onboarding process, we have started engaging with them. So I am pretty happy to inform you that we did not assign a single offer letter there, and we onboarded everybody in. But that engagement that we went through, we took them through for that period of 6 months almost. By the time they qualified to join in, really helped them a lot. It kind of gave them the stability and the mind frame. They were quite worried. They had a fragile mindset, and they were scared to be using the word. And we were able to touch base with that and allay those fears.
So Sanjay, that's really great to know. So next I'll go to Sonal, to you, that what has been L&T tech experience, and especially what is that you're doing different in the current year? Because current year, this entire online is a planned activity, unlike last year.
Sure. So, we are an engineering organization, and really working from home hasn't been a norm for us. So what we did really see emerging as the new mandates were agility and fungibility, more importantly. Now, the first thing that we really did, considering the kind of setup that we had, and one of the realizations that we did have was that we need to really equip our project managers and our people for work from anywhere kind of a hybrid model. Now, we did approach a lot of organizations and consulting firms because we wanted to make our people ready for that mode. And considering, more than 80% of our business comes globally, and people were really on site on customer locations, that would have impacted our business. So after we did all of that, we figured out that nobody is really thought in that direction. And we went ahead and we created a kind of a 3-day content, which we called as the WFX model. And what we did was, there were 3 things we included in that. Project management in WFX in hybrid environment, where we spoke about the different models, how they will evolve, customer models in the hybrid environment, and more importantly, how you'll manage people. So we introduce a set of competencies that we call as transversal competencies. Now, these are the competencies we believe which will draw on psychological resources in a particular context. And there were a set of certain transversal competencies like cognitive, interdisciplinary, growth mindset. So there were 7 of them that we defined. And we came to know we are the first one in the industry. So we even filed a patent for it, a trademark for it, which we got. We call the trademark as Omni Opus. And since nobody in the industry had thought about it, we were able to do that. So I think that has been a biggest learning. So far, we have, as we speak, we have close to 700 project managers who've gone through the certification. And so we've really made our people ready, not only for the here and now, but even for the future. So for us, it's that long, we really being long sighted. So I think that's one change that we've done. The second change in terms of hiring, if you were to ask me, there's been a lot of thought as to, how the hiring pattern should really change. Now, one of the initiatives that we really undertook, which I'll talk about, is an initiative which is called as Tech GM. So what we did was we invited 350 engineering colleges, including IITs and NIITs. And we gave them some live problems, customer problems. Now, these were students who were in their final year of engineering, who could go ahead and apply. And we told them to come up with POCs. Now, there are 22,000 students in India who applied for it. And they came up with POCs. And we did this entire process of assessment, mentoring and assessment with them. And then we offered them jobs. So for us, that was a new way of hiring where we are really seeing, there were two critical things that we wanted to see. One, we wanted to see people really displaying the real-time skills so that it helps us when we're looking at a fungible training model for ourselves, even in terms of hiring and skilling. So those are two big initiatives that we've undertaken. Apart from that, what we've really seen is there's been a 43% rise in training in last year. What is really done, we've tied up with more online partners. So this year we tied up another new contract. We are tying up for 3 years with online partners, and increasingly the appetite for learning and development, I think that you really see increasing in the last 1 year, where everybody wanted to do trainings. They even wanted trainings on the weekends. So I think that's a good change. And of course, consumerization of learning, creating that Netflix effect for people, where we are saying that it needs to be consumerized in such a manner that people can own their learning and become responsible for it. I think which is really for us led to democratization of learning too. So I think those have been the big takeaways for us as an organization.
So that's very helpful. One follow-up question that I wanted to ask based on what you said is that this model that you used to get 22,000 applications and you hired a lot of graduates out of them, I want to understand how many of them were able to retain them. Like once they hired L&T, because they are like top talent, right? Talent who does POC on customers problem are a top talent that everybody is going after. So you had good success in retaining them after they joining your
Yes. And I'll tell you, you will be really surprised. While you have, when POCs are created, why you will have, a person who will apply from IIT Mumbai, you will also have, like this year in the top 3, you will also have a person from Trivandrum who's in some remote college. But you will see that he has also come up with a POC that is unthinkable of. So when you really look, because ultimately, we're really talking about the application part of it. We are not gauging people on their conceptual knowledge. And as far as retention is concerned, it becomes easy for us, because once we see a person's POC, we also see it gives us a fair idea of where the person's inclination really lies, in which vertical. So for us, the alignment becomes really easy too. And, they have a long association for us for literally 3 to 4 months, where they even get mentored by us. So, they already have built a kind of a relationship with us, and that kind of credibility we've already established with them, which creates that kind of a stickiness factor too.
Sure, that sounds really good. My personal experience has not been that great. Like last year, we used a hackathon platform to hire a lot of people from my own Simply Learn team. We hired about 17, 18 fresh graduates on an average CTC of about 7 to 8 lakhs. Within 3 months, I lost half of them. They all got 12 lakhs CTC in Amazon and Flipkart, and they booked up.
True. We do hackathons
too. The same strategy, right? These are like top talent. We couldn't everybody hiring top talent.
Correct. And we do hackathons too, in India, and now this time we did it in Europe too. But hackathon, we've not used it as such a big channel for hiring. Tech GM, since it's a long drawn approach for us, and like hackathon is you're just making them do something overnight, or engagement, short-term engagement. This is a long-term engagement for us. So that's the reason, I think the way it's conceptualized really brings about that kind of a stickiness.
So they're also getting to know what kind of projects they will be working in future. So maybe that also is part of it.
Yes.
So next I'll move to you, Meera. So I think, Meera, I think we all got a couple of answers about what was the learning and what we are going to apply this year. Maybe you can cover that part, but I wanted to focus more on this new phenomena that we see in IT services world, wherein the hiring is happening at fresher hiring is happening at 3 different grades, right? A regular grade, and then there is people who are more skilled, they are getting paid differently, and then there's another third grade also, is a very, very high level grade. So what's the rationale, and what is that you're trying to achieve by doing that? How do you internally justify these 3 different level of cost?
You wanted also to us to say what is the role we have, right? So my role in Cognizant is being the India campus hiring and training and deployment head. We were like 3 different units. Now it's all combined under me, and I've been with the organization for 24 years. So specifically on the first part on what is the learning from last year, which we will apply or will not apply, I would say I'm very clear that like the campus selection that we did in 2020 Q4, which is the 2021 selects, pass outs, we had 150,000 students going through our test. And from there, 55,000 got shortlisted as test select. Then all of them had to go through interview over a period of like 6 weeks. Just imagine the stress on everybody, right? In an organization where like almost 25% of the employees had to be in interviews every day, like 6-7 interviews. Is that really a right approach to select talent for a technology organization? Something I've started wondering. Do it in like a time of 12 weeks or 10 weeks, test and interview, and then shortlist. So from 55,000, we shortlist around 27,000 as our final selects, and from then again there will be one more offer acceptance stage that will come. So that's something I'm thinking, that learning of virtual mode where everything had to be done in one go, will we do that? Is an open item for 2022 campus. Now coming to the graded way of selecting, that's going to stay, or it's going to be even more graded model. For example, if you take an organization like Cognizant or any technology services company, right? We have very specialized services that we provide, ranging from engineering service to a Salesforce or Pega or SAP or data science or to testing and maintenance, all of that, right? Development. So we have a varied range of specialized services, like 10 towers maybe. And each of this tower needs a specific kind of skill set to kind of start and then move on. Like, for example, Temenos or product, guide, where all of the data product thinking and then the product technology part of it. So the demand for a regular talent is getting more distributed, ranging from a engineering mindset or engineering hiring, which is at a high end, highest end, we call digital hiring kind of thing. Then you will have a special skill hiring, which is the product skills, and maybe even mathematics, statistics, pharma skills, all of that, which is again at a premium. You have to pay a premium to get that skill. Then you have another, again, specialized set of data and analytics, all of that. Again, it claims a premium. Then comes the regular. And I think there are going to be again shades of changes in this, where every 1,000 or 2,000 X number that you select would be for a special need. And then you will have maybe a large number of 10,000 or 5,000, which could be for a maintenance. That's how I see a skill-based hiring for technology services is here to stay. And we are going to see more of that in the 2022 selection for sure.
Thanks, Maya. So I think based on what you said, I think the problem statement that you shared is like really huge, that interviewing so many thousand people, and they say additional work for your regular employees, right? They have their regular project work also to do along with taking so many interviews. So I wanted to ask this question is that, see, any disruption, and we have been going through this disruption, and we're still not out of it, also fast track innovation. So during this period of 1 year, have you guys seen any technology or anything that really helped your life? Like for example, this interviewing, like there's a video interview that can be automated, right? So
I can tell you that. Yeah, I'll go first and on that. So we were thinking, should we use Teams or WebEx, or how should we interview? And we wanted the entire record, right? The recording of it. And then if you have to go back and see, multiple things had to be done. And there are multiple platforms available, highly scalable platforms. And I was like so surprised that the interview platform that we used was scalable to do any number of interviews in a day. Like we had like 3,000 interviews in a day. that kind of a scale. And there were no issues, absolutely no issues. And for the past 27 years, we had never even done that kind of interview, like all the panelists are saying. We never trusted that kind of an interview process for campus select. So, but then what are you interviewing for? And in that half an hour or 45 minutes, while we insist that you should do a 45 minutes to 1 hour interview, and these are the 6 competencies you should look for, you really cannot insist on the consistency when you have so many thousands of interviews by 10,000 of our employees doing. So that's an area to still think. Platform is there, but how is the platform going to really identify the capability in the individual? You know, a video platform is one, but the competency that you're evaluating, what are you evaluating for, and how is the platform intelligently picking that and giving you some insights will be something interesting to look for.
So I think anybody else wants to share, other than like Zoom, WebEx, or Microsoft Teams, any other technology that has become your like go-to technology or tool that you have been using during this current time?
I will not talk about the tool or technology, but I will talk about the platform, what we have developed at TechAim. Like we have 2 years ago, we developed something called as New Age Delivery Platform, our own ecosystem, and it has got multiple pods, like for design thinking as a service, development as a service. One of the services, upskilling as a service. We call it as NAD Learn, NAD, that is New Age Delivery Platform.
What do you call it? What Learn?
NAD, NAD, that is New Age Delivery. New Age Delivery is the name of our platform. So in NAD, we had already created something called as SKU. We call it as skill units, because the vision is that all our folks should be either full stack ready or full cycle ready. So adopting some of the things which are typically done at the startups, like every person should be able to do everything, like master of all kind of person. So we developed skill units. So almost 1,500 skill units are already defined, covering 7,500 skills. And for each skill, the courses are tagged, the assessment tagged, the practice platforms are tagged. So this entire repository was ready. So when actually the pandemic came in, people were knowing what they need to learn in next 1 year. So in fact, our skilling has doubled during April to June times, because people were knowing what to learn, where to learn, how to learn. And the same thing we applied even for our freshers. Like when they came in, the entire learning path was ready for them. It was like pick and choose kind of a thing, that which business unit you go, what are the prerequisite skills you need to learn, what are the account specific skills you need to learn, and how will you do that. And objective assessments, of course, linked with that. So that's the reason this platform really, we were quite proactive in terms of creating something, so that pandemic actually didn't had much impact on the learning. In fact, it had a positive impact, I would say.
So I think Vaishali, you spoke about that startups have full stack talent or full cycle ready talent. So I think that was the next question that I wanted to ask, is that, so there's 2 worlds that we live in. One is this world of technology services companies or large companies who have to deliver profitable growth. So quarter on quarter, you get measured on that your bottom line and top line both, right? And then there is a new age companies which are only chasing growth, right? Chasing growth at any cost, not really concerned about what kind of money they are losing. So their ability to move fast, their ability to pay also is pretty high. And what new trend that I see is that traditionally these companies were always relying on buying talent. So they'll go into the market and hire people wherever they can get at whatever price they can get. But off lately, what I've seen is that many of these young companies also have started going to campus and started hiring fresh graduate and started hiring fresh graduate as a strategy to build their team. So do you see this like impacting your hiring strategy? And the reason I'm telling you is that, see, this, especially in IT services companies, even 15 years back, also a lot of entry salary used to be 3 lakhs. And now also it is 3 lakhs, right? So do you see this getting impacted with a lot of small companies start going and tapping talent?
Yeah, so I think there are multiple components involved over here. Like one of the reason why people join any organization is the kind of work they are going to do over there. And I think, as Sonal touched upon it, that engagement level, the exposure, because now the young generation asks the question that what is in it for me? What am I going to do? How am I going to grow? So it's not only about the starting of your career, but if we make them very clear that how they are going to grow in the organization, what are the career opportunities, how the organization is investing into the individual growth, not only from the compensation perspective, but their own development, giving them more opportunities. That's how I think it attracts the talent. And in the larger organization, the variety of roles are there, or as Maya said, that there are so many verticals and so many different kind of roles people can play. If they are good into product development, they can explore that. If they are good into digital, they can move over there. Engineering, so they get a lot more exposure. Second thing is, again, even said that on-site opportunity is something which freshers are always looking out for, that whether I'm in a position to go on-site and work at the customer location. So that is something is there. Then there are a lot of higher education opportunities which are provided by the organizations. Like we have tie-up with BITS Pilani or certain business schools. So these are additional to the package. I think people also consider all these aspects when joining any organization. So, and where startups are not necessarily offering all these kind of things. So that's where people make a choice while accepting any offer.
Yeah, and I'll just add on to what Vaishali said. And I'll talk about, there's a lot of consciousness, when it comes to, an organization like ours, where that, 80% of your people are millennials. And for us, there are very specific interventions that we've carved out. Now, one of the intervention which we feel is very unique that we carved out is an intervention which is called as the CEO Club. Now, this is an intervention, we carved out in partnership with one of the big fours, where anybody in the organization who aspires to be a CEO can apply. Now, anybody means a fresher to a person who has 22 years of experience. Now, this is the 4th year we are running it. Now, the youngest person who's a part of the CEO club, he only has 2 years of experience. The person gets aligned to the CEO for a period of 1 year. He comes up with an idea, incubates the idea, and moves into a leadership role. Then there is another intervention which we call as YABC, which is the Young Advisory Board to the CEO. Now, this board only comprises of people who are below 30 years of age. Now, what these people really do is that it's a board of advisory which rotates, and then they form an alumni. And they consult with the CEO on how we can scale the organization to the next level. Now, and then there is one big initiative which we run. So as an organization, we are divided into 2 parts: organization development and organization effectiveness. And organization development is only responsible for identifying high potentials and developing leaders for tomorrow. Now, here also we pick up youngsters. So every year we do this entire thing of high potential identification, young leaders. We put them through development journey for 1 year, and then we make them a part of a pool called as Leaders League, and then we open out all leadership positions to them. So honestly speaking, the kind of environment that you've really created in the organization is that age and experience, it does not really matter so much as long as you have the competence to really be out there. There are galore opportunities for you. And I think that has been a kind of a USP for us to attract young talent too. So these are some of the initiatives, that have been carved out specifically.
So, Sonal, Vaishali, what I hear for you is that you have built a lot of engagement as you hire fresh graduates. So they are not only looking at what they're getting on day one, they can also see a future, and which future is very, very diverse.
Absolutely. Because, they are very clear. I think if you really look at their mindset, they really want to know what's next for them. And they are not the kind of people who would really go in and wait for a traditional growth path. In fact, the first question that they would ask you is, do you have 2 growth paths in the organization? One is fast track and one is normal. And what does the fast track growth path really look like? That's the first question they would ask you. So I think, we also need to change in alignment with that.
Sanjeev, you wanted to add something?
I was just adding one factor, Krishna, here, that these guys also are very well networked. So as Sonal rightly said, the experience sharing happens with their peers and seniors pretty well. And they get to know what exactly is happening, what kind of experiences their seniors have had. And while they all join for various factors, and those factors ruled their minds before, they now have started definitely taking a look at stability and the resilient appetite of an organization to offer them an appropriate career basis the experiences that they have heard of. So they are making appropriate choices that way.
Got it. So you're saying that the stability also is really very important, right? And that's
Paramount, no.
Maya, I wanted to add something.
I think what I want to add is, if you are highly competent and skilled, the opportunities are plenty for them. So if you take a segment of students in India who are passing out, you will have primarily 4 grades or shades you see. Now, who are the one you want to attract? Like Sonal said, the programs that they have, all organizations have some very unique programs to accelerate their career. No, they can have new startups created within the organization. All that attracts the top talent. But the question is about the ones that are in the 3rd and the 4th grade or shade in that talent pool. Where do they go? That's like in huge numbers. And how do you differentiate their growth and their development in an organization? That is where there is still a kind of I mean, even though we put career architecture in front of them, saying that you join as a developer and then you become senior developer, but you might join as a developer in data science, or you might join in Java. Data science person could fast track, grow much faster maybe than the Java, or vice versa. Now, if you step back and look at it, to your question on, is there a challenge we see because there are so many startups? There is no challenge. The challenge is from the huge numbers that we recruit in many of the organizations. How do you differentiate that talent? And how do you give them that growth path and that clarity to that large number is a challenge. So startups look little lucrative for them because they get a bit more salary, they get the attention first itself. Here in large companies, it might be one among the 1,000. So that is the kind of differentiation that we as organizations will go and tell them that, okay, when you join large organizations, you have a opportunity to work in so many areas. You might not see fast growth like a startup and earn more in the first 3 years, but think of it as like a 15-year technology journey that you have. You would have tried out new things, worked with multiple customers, and then you get an opportunity to really broaden. We call the T skills, right? You might have the comb skills itself, multiple depths and breadth. When you put it that way, I think we are able to attract a lot more talent. That's how I would add.
But this is very good perspective. So now I think next question, and I think somebody has asked also on the Q&A there, is that there are cases wherein you are going to the same campus, maybe the same branch of engineering also, and hiring talent at different levels. So if there's a student who's part of our attendees, and you want to give some tips on how can you be part of the top talent, not the bottom talent, what will be some of your suggestions that they can start working towards while they're in the first and second year of engineering, or for MBA? I'm sure you have talent that side also.
I'll add for engineering, and then so this is a common question that now is the campus season is starting, right? In 3-4 months, the 2022 season will start. So all the students have started asking this. I would say problem solving, critical thinking and problem solving is like a bedrock of any customer organization that you're going. So having 10 certifications doesn't help. So credentialing is fine, skilling is fine, but how do you apply skill to solve the problem is mandatory. So that is where that whole problem solving mindset comes. That is first. So what they have to do is build competence. When I say competence, like Vaishali said, it's a full stack competence we are talking about. It's not that, okay, I can do core Java and then I end with that. You need to know Java, Hibernate, Spring MVC, the entire stack, SQL, all of that. Or if you're in the data side, you need to know the SQL and the visualization of it. So build your competence first, apply that to solve a problem, and then try to replicate solving similar problem in another area. And fourth is try to explain that to someone on how can they solve a similar problem, right? If these 4 things they can do seamlessly and explain, I think a large part of the job is done. But if you are looking at that high-end salary, like a 10 lakh or a above kind of thing, then you have to have a strong coding experience. If you talk about technology company as an engineer, I tell them that the first 10 years is all about solving customer problems through some technology. So we cannot run away from that. The old days of becoming a manager, they ask the question, when will I become a manager? When will I start managing people? It's not there. For the first 10 years, it's not there. So how do you show that the long coding experience, right? And how do you apply the best practice in coding and having that high performing code using whatever technology? That has to be demonstrated. Then only they can claim that higher end salary. The last point I would say is the communication and the holistic approach towards life itself. You might be great at all of this, but then how do you articulate that and present it to your interviewer or to the organization, wherever it is? Today plays a very, very large role, because day one you are put in front of customer and you need to connect with the customer and articulate, think on your feet and respond to them. So all of this will become important for you to earn that higher end salary package.
Makes sense. So I think this was very helpful. So next thing that I wanted you to share, and any one of you can go, is that somebody wants to build a career as an L&D professional. What does it take to build a career as an L&D professional? What do you think are the attributes that makes that person successful in that role?
So, probably I can speak about that. And probably, I only started my career in L&D and never moved and did any generic HR role for the last 22 years. So I think, and this is what I look for when I'm hiring a person. And this is what I always tell my team. I think one of the main ingredients is that a person has to be a lifelong learner. The second ingredient, which I think I really look for, is having that exploratory mindset. And the third key thing is that, there is this innate passion, which I believe that each and every person who comes from this kind of a background has, that, this is the career or this is the field in which they really want to be. And I have really seen that, even with the people who are there with me, that's a deliberate choice that people really do make. And that choice definitely comes, with a lot of radars. And one of the biggest radar really has to be that, I think one of the mandates that this function really has is that there are a lot of behaviors which one needs to really emulate when you're a part of an organization. And somewhere you need to stand up and be role models if you're going to stand up for the organization, and stand up for the leadership team and stand up with the people and tell them, give them feedback about their behaviors and make them learn and make them transform. So I think those are the basics that one needs to really have. A lot of people who are really aspiring to be in this field, there are a lot of mentors who are available now. There are a lot of platforms. Even before, you really go ahead and embark on a full-fledged career journey, if you today see whether it's a LinkedIn, they are, I think, around 60 forums which are present out there, where you can go ahead and have a mentor even when you are in a college itself, if you really want to go that way. So I think it's always a good idea, to build that kind of a relationship with someone and learn more about the field. So, those are going to be my 2 bits about it.
So, yeah, I can add.
I think I would like to definitely talk about, because you moved from delivery to L&D, right?
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to say. For 16 years, I was in core delivery. I was in the US, Europe, all of that, doing continuously project delivery in PeopleSoft, multiple areas. And then, like Sonal said, there was a part of me always inclined to move into training. And when I did my post-graduation itself, I used to work with AppTech in the evenings. I used to go and teach. But training never gave the money at that time. And that's why, I moved into the IT. I mean, I started as a software developer itself. So moving from a pure delivery, technology delivery to L&D and then to the campus role, if you ask me today, what are the top 2, 3 things that L&D professionals should have, it has changed a lot from what it used to be 5 years back. See, earlier, you will have to ask someone, how can I learn this? What should I do to learn this? Today, you don't need a mediator like that. You don't need you have all the ammunition and tools available. You search, you can learn whatever you want. Now, so what is the L&D professional's role? You could say it's a curator or a learning design architect, who can put all these things together and create a learning path for you, a structured agenda for you to move from point A to B to C to D. That is the part I would say as the first core capability a L&D professional should have, that There are so many things available, content-wise, platform-wise, assessments, no hands-on, everything. You as a L&D professional, how are you able to stitch that together and give the shortest path to the learning transfer and agility by which you can demonstrate that in a customer project? I'm again putting all this in a technology environment, I mean, a technology role. No, so that is the first thing. Second is having that mindset to understand the customer problem. So L&D professional has two customers. One is business, one next is your end consumer. That is your student or the professional, right? What do they need versus what does business need? Now, addressing both the customers, because your businesses will always say, okay, I want the employee to be trained today and deployed tomorrow and deliver day after to the customer with X revenue, which is not possible, right? So you have to balance that. At the same time, you have a consumer who would have trained on a skill X mainframe. Now they have to move to a data science, or I mean, whatever adjacency skill it is. You will have to get that learning transfer and skilling done with a certification and a hands-on and interview readiness. So how can you know that unless you don't understand how to skill yourself, right? So knowing the domain through a skilling itself, like Sonal said about that agility to be the lifelong learner as well as curiosity, experiential learning. But how as a L&D professional are you applying it? How are you showing that, okay, I did multiple things and this is how you learn Python and get certified. So I did that. Because no, I should be able to convincingly say that, okay, I'm certified in Python and it takes only so much to do it. There are 6 simulation programs, you do it, you can be a developer. So that kind of a hands-on experience to skill yourself is very important. These are the two things I would say.
Yeah, I think Sonal and sorry, I'd like to just add one thing that training or L&D is no more a support function. Like it's a core business function, I would say, and the trainers can't say that I'll just focus on the technology or the leadership skill. They need to equally understand the business and implications to business. So why am I delivering this training? Why I need to design this and how it is really going to impact the business as well as the person or the learner. So I think that understanding the business language is also very critical these days for the L&D professionals. Rest all points I absolutely agree with Sonal and Maya.
I completely agree. I think overall HR itself is the most important function because at the end of the day, all of us are building like people organization, right? People is the biggest asset. So absolutely agree.
On a lighter note, Krishna, you stepped on a hornet's nest with that question. People like us in this field, we can go on hours and hours and hours how one should become professional, you know, how obsessive one should be versus rather a manufactured L&D professional. So
yeah, I think Maya doesn't want to move back to delivery, right? So there's a good testimony that she's enjoying this role, and this role is maybe more interesting and more fulfilling than getting like stuck to one business unit or one project. And so
I really hope she doesn't opt for that.
Yeah, I think you're seeing more people from line and business, you know, moving into the L&D function. Like even if you were to look at organizations like CFI and all other organizations where you've got CEO coaches, where you see most of, you know, the CXOs now taking over the role as formal coaches and moving into the learning space. So you're seeing more and more of those transitions happening now.
No, I completely agree. So I'll just take one more question that is also has come as a Q&A, is that are companies looking at introducing new models to engage freshers? Like internship is another one model. You know, Charlie, you were talking about it. It would be good if you can share your perspective on do you think this is becoming a popular model? Because so far what I understand, my understanding is that mostly MNCs have used this approach for a really long time. But Indian companies, they primarily has believed in going to the campus, hiring them, and then from there on the process starts.
Yeah, so two models I'll explain. One is about the Elevate, which is our internship model and which is quite similar to what Sonal was talking about, the POC. So what we are doing, we are offering the internships to students who are into their engineering. And since now, again, one of the advantage of pandemic, then since everything is virtual, they join us as virtual interns. The only thing is that before giving them the internship letter, we ensure that the business has identified necessary mentors from them. They have identified the area where these people will start working. And then whatever the necessary training, as I spoke in terms of the SKUs, that is also offered to these interns. So eventually then they can take a call whether they would like to continue or they want to shift, because rather than taking from campus and they come with a very fixed mindset that I want to work as a Java developer. But once they get into the organization, they know that there are so many wide variety of roles, technologies available. So that internship model gives them that kind of flexibility to really explore that, whether I'm fit for the role and what additional I need to do. That's one model. Second is we also have on our NAD, that new age delivery platform, we have got something called as flex.ai, because eventually we will see this entire workforce, maybe a floating workforce, or people maybe doing 3 or 4 jobs at a time, based on the work packages kind of a thing. So that flex.ai, it offers absolute flexibility for the people, that I can, we publish whatever our work packages are there. Anyone can pick up it based on the competence. Of course, there are assessments for that. And then you deliver that work package. So you get the experience for that. So that's the flex.ai model we are having, not only for freshers, but even for the lateral people. But we are expecting that that kind of trend would also go up. Maybe not 100%, but maybe 15 to 20% of people would be interested in doing multiple things, not just sticking to one job or one role, and they may explore further. So that also we have started producing projects on that.
Is only for your Tech Mahindra employees, or Flex.ai is
No,
for
no. Anyone can apply through that.
So I think I'll take a last question, because one important stakeholder we didn't touch is the campuses. That if we're talking about so much of fresher hiring happening, how can campuses prepare their students better? What is that they could do different? I'll tell you one personal experience that I have is that one of the large campuses that we are engaged as Simplilearn is that their problem statement was that everybody gets placement. We don't have placement challenge. That was a very refreshing thing to hear from a college, saying that we don't have placement challenge. We get 100% placement. But the challenge was that the placement is happening at below 5 lakhs as an average CTC. We want to increase our average CTC. And that's where they engaged us to do a lot of programs that we map to their curriculum, and students are going through the program. So and I still to see how effective it is. I think we'll get to know only in the next 6 months or so on whether it really worked or not. But I wanted to hear from you that if the same question comes to you, and as a hiring leader in a large company, hiring and training leader in a large company, what will be your suggestions to the placement director at one of these campuses? What can they do, and when can they do those interventions to get better results?
As such, today itself I had connected with few colleges, because we are again in the campus season time, right? See, maximum partnership with varied companies. So it's not like one partnership with a Cognizant or XYZ. So it could be Cisco or any companies, right? Have the students experience varied industries, explore their interests. So having like 25 partnerships or 30, they should have a target of which are the companies they want to have industry partnerships with. Maximize the potential of that. It's not about labs or anything, right? But have the students interact and understand about them. And that takes effort. Now, if you have to have an enriching relationship with like multiple companies, you need to invest in that. So as a placement officer, expanding that and moving away from some of the old ones and looking into some of the new ones, even with startup ecosystem and all of that. That is one I would say. Second is skill building doesn't start in the 6th semester, right? Most of the institutes start their placement preparation from 6th semester. They'll introduce training and all of that, technology skilling. I would say move away from the technology skilling focus, start on the problem solving and critical thinking, complex problem solving from the 1st semester. Like BITS Pilani, if you know some of the leading organizations of India, they spend like almost 1 semester or more in just that point, right? Every week, students will have to think of a problem statement, come with a point of view, try to solve it as a team. In an agile model, you do it multiple things. I think a lot of investment has to go in that from the 1st semester itself, so that by 4th semester they are kind of in that groove of thinking of problems and solving problems, and then introduce technology. And on top of all of this, communication skills and articulating what they have in mind is non-negotiable. It's been there for 25 years, but I think still we see that's a huge challenge. And the whole vernacular language, usage of that in all your explanation to customers doesn't take them to the next level. So those are the 3 things I would say the placement officers have to focus much early in the graduation cycle, and give more time for internship instead of doing 8 semester internship. Like today, one institute was saying they're autonomous, so they complete their internship, everything, all the curriculum by end of 6th semester. So 7th and 8th are available for the companies. So things like that, move it upstream, all your subjects, so that 1 year is available to do real projects.
I think, Krishna, it's been almost for the last 2-3 decades I have been hearing that, basics like communication skills are still a problem. It is, sad to see that state of affairs still continuing. I mean, it's high time that institutions start concentrating on that and how they can improve the employability. And this is so basic, literally so basic that it is surprising that the problem persists. If a person is unable to articulate and communicate appropriately, even now at this age and at this kind of facilities available, that means somewhere there is a lack of concentration towards those aspects. They are still going on churning out the same kind of people. So perhaps they should have role readiness in their mind and employability in their mind, and work on how they can have exposure to targeted industry veterans. Things like this can be useful.
So I think I wanted to end, but I have a very interesting question that I definitely wanted to answer to get your view. Is that, see, for a long time, companies like you have gone to campuses and hired graduates. Now a new trend, and you build your own factory model, right? Training people and deploying them to various towers. Now this has become a full-time business. Like a lot of new companies have come in. They're going and hiring these freshers, training them for a couple of months, and then they're deploying them. And some of them have a very interesting model that they don't charge any upfront fee from the students, right? They recover from whatever offer they get from the companies and get paid over a period of time. Do you see that becoming a major source for your hiring in future? That you'll go to such companies which are already trained on various kinds of stack, right? Full stack, data science, cloud, and so on, rather than going, hiring, and then training at your expense?
Okay.
Are you like watching that trend seriously? Or?
Yeah. So it has been there, Krishna, always the train and hire model, right? Where trained people are available for deployment. But I don't see that model working well for us. It has never worked to the extent that we wanted it to, because of the demand pattern changes. So we will give a requirement, they'll have them ready at a certain time, but I wouldn't need them on that time. But then who will give the whole day, have the holding cost? Now, but I know that a lot of captives are using this model. When the numbers are very defined and you know the timeline when you will take them, then it works very well. But in an uncertain model, where the demand fluctuations happen based on customer requirements, it's very tough. It's a good model if you have predictability to your demand.
Yeah, and it really depends, for certain skills, you may use the build and deploy model. So for us as an organization, for certain specific skills, we do use that. So we know that they come with a certain amount of readiness. So instead of, training them for a period of 4 months, the training is cut short. Then, just 2 months, and they are ready to be deployed. But then those are some very specific skills. And I think in one way that you'll also see a lot of changes happening in the entire structure as it is, if I were to really talk about technology services as a whole, is that more and more, now, even if you're really looking at the modules, fungibility is becoming a key aspect. So, even if you're talking about, a training which is going to be 4 or 5 months, the first 2 months of training is going to be on a cut short model, where you're looking at fungible focus skill-based model. So that tomorrow, because in an industry, whether it's Cognizant or it's like ours, and like she said, a forecasting and accurate forecasting will always be an issue. And the kind of business model that you have is that you may not have long drawn annuity kind of a business. So your projects can be as short as 6 months or a year too. That means people have to be fungible enough to move from one project to another. And upskilling should also really be easy. So you see more and more, that kind of a model getting adopted now.
So
and yes, but I see the dependence. People may look out now for the build and deploy model more, given the last 1 year. That's what I feel.
Thank you, everyone. I think there are a lot of points that we can keep talking about and keep going, but we have limited time. I think we just crossed our time limit by 2 minutes. So thank you. Really appreciate your time and have a great day ahead. Over to you, Abid.
Thank you everyone. Thank you all the panelists for their valuable insights. And we really agreed on a lot of things that you guys have said. And I also want to thank you for taking out time and sharing your thoughts. And also, I want to share my gratitude to all the viewers for joining in and spending valuable time with us. So do subscribe ETHR World and follow us on all the social media platforms to know everything about people in work. Thanks a lot. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Krishna.
Bye. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.
Yeah.